Today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners, who for more than 25 years have successfully delivered interim and permanent leadership talent to transform businesses. To hire the talent you need to enable your business to thrive, visit www.progressotalent.com today. Hey listeners, welcome to Extrology. Today, we've an extraordinary guest who wears many hats and embodies the spirit of adventure, sustainability, and mental well-being. Isaac Kenyon is not your average keynote speaker. He's one of the youngest international keynote speakers in the world, specialising in sustainability leadership, mental health, motivational resilience, and team building. Isaac is a true Renaissance individual, a philanthropic, world record-breaking British eco-adventurer and endurance athlete, an energy transition expert communicator, a fellow of the Royal Geographical Society of London and the Geological Society of London, and a trustee for Mind, the mental health charity. His purpose is crystal clear: to empower individuals to make a positive difference in both the environment and the mental health of others. So what's the story behind the story? Without further ado, let's get into it. Isaac Kenyon, welcome to Extrology. Great to have you as my guest here this afternoon. Really looking forward to getting into a huge range of topics, fascinating background, but I think particularly that fascinating background to which I refer. You've got a really impressive and frankly diverse set of experiences, from eco-adventures to mental health advocacy. Could you share with our listeners a bit about your journey and what led you to become so passionate about both sustainability and well-being?
Yeah, I can definitely tell everyone in a nutshell, nature saved my life, and I will go into that. It all started, this advocacy for the environment, for mental health, very, very, very long time ago as a child. You know, my father was introducing nature and connecting me to nature from a very young age. We used to go fishing, on fishing trips along, on the rivers and things like that. He's a fisherman. He loves salmon fishing and things like this. And I really enjoyed those days. Along the way, though, I had an academic career and aspirations. And what happened was I was basically connected with nature through my father, but then disconnected through the way society is now moving. So when I was 15, 16 years old, I was at school, things started getting more digital. Life started getting a bit more, study orientated. I was not getting outdoors as much. And I kind of lost nature, really. And I started focusing so much on delivering tech. And when I say delivering tech, I'm delivering my thesis or my reports. And, it extrapolated in university. It just got worse and worse and worse, to the point where I was so disconnected with nature. And upon reflection, I believe this is why I went into a mental health crisis. I was so disconnected with nature. I was trying to push myself so hard to deliver on all these assignments and hit these grades that I started developing mental health issues. And I realized upon reflection that those mental health issues could have been easily resolved if I just reconnected with nature how my dad does. Every so often, get outdoors. He goes fishing. I now do sports and adventures and outdoor activities. But I didn't know at the time that I was developing a mental health issue. I also didn't know that outdoor reconnection was so important, that connection with nature.
So just go back a step. Where did you grow up? Just for context, did you grow up in the countryside?
I didn't grow up in the countryside, so that's why it was even more special that my dad was able to take me to these fishing trips. Yeah. So we used to wake up at 3 a.m. in the morning, and he used to drive us to the rivers down in Devon. And we used to spend the whole day fishing, occasionally, once every week or every other week during the fishing season. And that was me getting really into nature. Otherwise, the other stuff is kind of town parks, which is nature, but not quite the same. That's kind of my upbringing. I was in a town called Luton. It's quite a deprived town. And I was fortunate. My dad wasn't deprived. He worked very hard and he made a very good business. So I was quite different from my peers at school. I guess I had a wealthier background, but I was still sharing the same schools around the deprived area. It wasn't safe to go out in these town parks or, walk to school without some support. I could walk back from school and get nicked. That was quite often in the news, but those were old days. I've moved since then to other places.
And when you mentioned on reflection, when you were at university, you could see, I guess, not to make an assumption, but with the benefit of hindsight, that had you have spent more time in nature, that might have been a great help. But did you sense that at the time? Did you feel maybe I need to be getting out? I'm so kind of into the screen. Yeah, understandably, I think that's true for many in the midst of their studies. But you're into a screen. Did you have that sense that maybe some time outside would have been beneficial?
I lost sense because everyone was doing it.
Yeah,
I was in this community of people who just lived indoors, who lived on screens, and I forgot those past things that my father used to do with me, and it all just disappeared because it also didn't occur to me that getting outdoors is actually good for productivity and is actually good for your health and would make me probably think with more clarity and have better answers and my work would be better. I never thought of that. I always thought that better results, more work, better results, more work. I saw everyone else was doing it, longer and longer hours. And we all were doing it in my class, the university, the whole faculty. You look at the lecturers, they look exhausted. They're always working all the time. And it just wasn't natural for me. I don't think I was suffering. I was crying inside. And then what happened was there was that realization, a real big realization where my grades started falling apart, my relationships, my sleep, my diet, everything was just collapsing around me. And then I started going into all sorts of thoughts.
Could you acknowledge this at the time as one of the hardest things is you're in the midst of it. It's not always so easy to be able to see it. Did you see it for yourself, or did someone have to point it out to you?
I did see it happening because I was waking up more and more unhappy and struggling to even wake up some days. And then I was like, okay, we've got a real problem here. I'm not even enjoying waking up. And on reflection, that's so sad. I was 18, 19 years old. I'm at the beginning of my life. Where to start? I shouldn't be thinking like that. And I laugh it off now, but actually it was a horrible time. It was suicidal ideation coming in, all sorts of scary stuff. And I was like, I just didn't understand what life was anymore. I lost my purpose, my meaning. Everything was gone. I did have a bit more purpose and meaning when I was younger. And I always wanted to get involved in doing stuff to help the earth and the planet. I lost my way at university. I started focusing on the grades and, as I said, and the results, and the why message got lost in the process of doing tasks. And I became so task orientated that I lost myself.
Do you think that's an interesting perspective on what society values? The thing that oftentimes has struck me is that once upon a time, we placed great virtue on the thinker. We even created a statue, for goodness sake. But if you go back tens of thousands of years, we had, if you were a philosopher or a thinker, there was huge value. That was they were the rock stars of their day, right? But it strikes me that life gets ever busier and busier and busier and busier, and we start to value, broad sweeping statement, but nonetheless, we start to place that value on doing. Yeah. So there's a comfort almost that comes with being busy. It kind of, it feels like that's purposeful, but actually it's quite corrosive. There's little time to literally stop and smell the roses.
Yeah.
So how did that...
So what happened?
That acknowledgement, for you, that sense of losing purpose, I think was the phrase. At what point did you go, how did that play out for you? At what point did you go, enough's enough?
There was an intervention. So where I was staying in my halls to where I would go and work, I would walk through this woodland at university. That was my walk. And I noticed whenever I was on that walk, it was my favorite part of the day. It was only 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, but it was my favorite part of the day. And because I was in so much despair, everything was just like, I can't face this other 10 more pages of this thesis, or I can't be bothered to go to this lecture again. And it was just, all those things were negative, but that walk was positive. And I used to love it, even when it was soaking with rain or whatever. It was just great. And then what happened was I was just crashing, and I actually opened up to a friend of mine who said to me, what do you like most? And I'd said, I like, doing that walk at the moment. It's the only thing I like in the day. He said, okay, why don't you spend a whole day doing a walk? Just go for a long, long walk until your mind is clear.
Smart friend.
He was a smart friend. I don't know if he's ever, I talk about him a lot when I talk about this, why I've come to this journey, but I don't think he truly understands the impact it had on me by saying that. He said that to me. I immediately said, okay, I'm going to take Saturday, which in academia is actually another work day. You just carry on doing your thesis. So Sunday, I was like, I got to just take a day. So I took a day. I'm just going to walk around. I was in Surrey, and I just walked all around the fields. I went along rivers. I went to lakes. I went through forests. And, as the walk went on, I was becoming more, upon reflection, mindful of what was happening.
Do you remember how it made you feel if you reflect back now?
Noise disappearing. It was like this ringing sound of, this must be done. You have to do this. Oh my God, this has to be done. That doing, as we spoke about, was in my head all the time. And that looming deadlines of this, deadlines of that, worries started all disappearing, because I was then focusing on where my feet go, and also just taking in some of the nature. And I started to listen. I could listen to nature, and it was speaking to me. It was saying to me, this is your day. Enjoy it. It was giving me something. And it's so generous. And to this day, nature is the most generous thing in the world. It never asks for anything. It just gives. And we're so cruel. There's a cruel injustice on the planet right now. We just take so much from it, but don't respect it. And that day, I had some serious, deep respect for it. And there was this power. And it was kind of probably what I felt when I was a child with my dad, and how I would listen to the river going past as we were fishing. And I really enjoyed those moments. I was back, I'm like, I'm back. And it was a reconnection with what I cared about and what meant a lot to me. And that moment of clarity, I could start thinking about what I cared for, where my future was going. That one day was the turning point. It was the penny drop. It was that whole, I want to have more of this. What is this special thing? It's not a drug. It's not from the doctor. It wasn't therapy. It was nature. And I always say, my life changed, nature saved me. I want to save nature. That's kind of where this has all come from. This environmental activism, or eco-adventures, wherever you want to call it, sustainable leader. All of this has stemmed from that moment. And I felt like we've got to protect this thing. It protects other people. It protects me. Since this moment, millions of people have probably connected with nature, and a lot of environmental activists will have that connection. Most general public have that connection. I can talk to someone, and every single person will say to me that they respect nature. Not many of them would say, screw nature. Not many of them would. I know there are some people out there who would, but their time is coming. And I think my time came early. And that realization is, we have to protect this thing. It protects us.
And was it that realization? You founded Climate Explorers CIC, which is
a long journey from that moment.
A B Corp dedicated to eco-adventures.
Yeah.
So you've kind of explained. I was interested to understand what motivated you to start the organisation, and how perhaps therefore it aligns with your mission of making a positive difference for the environment and indeed mental health. But if you go back, what's the journey to Climate Explorers?
Well, for me, it's what is sustainability? What is this term? And it's a word thrown around in boardrooms, in reports and journal. It's a word that's just there. But what is this word? Where does it come from? Where's its origin? What does it mean? And I think that word is important to get it right. And it has a profound meaning. It does have a meaning if you understand it. And I believe that a lot of people who connect with nature truly understand the meaning of the word sustainability.
What does it mean to you?
From my perspective, nature and sustainability are almost the same thing.
Yeah.
So sustainability to me is we must maintain and protect nature because it maintains and protects us. And with our well-beings are interconnected. That's why I bring mental health into this. So more often than not, sustainability is always spoken about separately from mental health. I think of it as one and two. Without a strong well-being planet, we don't have a strong well-being in us.
That's a really interesting perspective. I've never thought of it quite that way.
The two are connected, but in branding and marketing, the way businesses are set up, the way they talk about it, it's two separate. We've got a mental health policy, we've got a sustainability policy. But they don't realize that if the ecosystem of nature fails, we don't have the means to be able to, give ourselves food, get our time outside so that we can actually be the creatures that we are. We're like animals that need to exercise and get outdoors and feel the fresh air, get vitamin. If we take all of this away, we're losing our well-being. So our well-being is intrinsically linked with the well-being of the planet. That's what my theory is. That's my theory of change, because I feel that if we can change the mindset where people can start thinking that we are connected with the planet and the planet's connected with us, then when we start doing our decision-making, like sustainability becomes not a term that's like a tick box option or, a metric. It becomes a real intrinsic thing that's part of you as a person. We need less sustainability words, more sustainability souls.
Do you think, in terms of how that plays out from a corporate perspective, I can't think of any organisation who doesn't espouse the virtues that our people are our greatest asset, et cetera, et cetera. So it makes perfect sense that a well-balanced, healthy, mentally and physically, but a healthy workforce will ultimately be healthy performers, right? The alignment is not up for dispute. If you've got healthy, engaged workers, you've got healthy, engaged outcomes.
Yeah.
Healthy outcomes, positive outcomes, profitable outcomes, whatever the motive may be. And yet, as I see it, I don't know that I see that many organisations overtly, openly, truly adopting that kind of philosophy and practice. There are clearly some, but it strikes me they might just be a minority, and I've got no data to back that up, just an intuitive sense of what I see. So is that a fair assessment? Do you see organisations who are truly now starting to connect the genuine well-being and welfare of their employees with the aims, vision, aspirations of the organisation? And if so, how are they doing it?
I think they are starting to come round to it, because the question is, business as usual is going to kill us all.
Yeah.
We got to change business. The way we do business needs to change. And change comes from people. So the people need to change. Behaviour needs to change.
And is that consumption? It's too simplistic a phrase to just wrap it up in one term, but is that consumption is what is killing the planet?
I think consumption can be balanced with regeneration.
Yep. Okay.
So if we can regenerate as much as we consume, that's basically we give and we take on an equal balance. Yep. Sustainability.
Back to balance, right? This word balance.
Yeah. I think right now the businesses of today are already shifting mindset to thinking, how can we protect the planet so that we can continue taking? Because we can keep taking, and great, you've got everything, mate. Oh, wait, it's all gone. The whole planet's dead. Okay, that was great fun, wasn't it? While it lasted. I mean, we've got to get past this thinking, and I've got to suggest that today everyone needs to be a sustainability leader. Everyone. We've all got to be in on it. And thinking about the well-being of our employees in a business sense, we've got to start thinking about the well-being of the planet, because the people need the planet for their well-being. They need to get active, need to get outdoors. They need to have that time in nature, but they also need to understand and respect it so that they understand that they're intrinsically linked with the outdoors. This message is lost. It was years and years and years ago. We were working with nature. We worked off the land. We regenerated as much as we took. It was very much a years and years I'm talking about, before we started agriculture. Hunter-gatherer style, right? Long time ago. And I think today we are getting to a stage where businesses aren't there yet, but they are moving in that direction. And I can see that. more and more B Corps or more and more companies with sustainability policies or well-being policies. And yes, policies are great. And a lot of people might ridicule me on the podcast saying, oh yeah, policies, it's just paperwork, mate. It doesn't mean anything unless the people actually enact on it. Well, the fact that they've even put pen to paper is the start.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, without that policy, it certainly doesn't happen.
Yeah, you got to start from somewhere. You got to benchmark yourselves and So we can say, good for them, they're doing it. But now I think that the next step is action and implementation, and leaders are the ones that need to lead the change of the well-being practices or the sustainability practices. They need to be embodiment of that, so that the people younger generations see hope as well. I probably developed eco-anxiety as well at the realization when I realized how important nature was. I researched how we treat nature. Should never have done that. Should never have done that. I developed eco-anxiety straight after my mental health issue. So I had anxiety and panic disorder that I was dealing with, and then nature helped me, and I started noticing that all of that started disappearing, and very fleetingly has it ever come back. And I literally go into nature, it's like a reset button. But pretty soon after that, after researching how devastating and damaging we've been to the environment and the planet, I developed eco-anxiety. And then I solved my eco-anxiety with taking action to support the environment, because I know that at least I can feel that I'm giving something and trying to change the situation. And I feel with every action, there is hope. And with every piece of hope, there's solution.
Let's talk about some of those actions. So talk about how what is it that you're doing to affect not only clearly your own well-being, but the well-being of the planet? What are you doing to affect that? Because I think that sometimes people have this sense of, but it's just me, it's so big, what can I do? Yeah. But everything, I think, starts with one person taking one step.
I like that, yeah.
So what is it that you're doing to affect that kind of outcome?
Yeah, I mean, the whole problem is like a behemoth. It's huge. It's overwhelming. And my philosophy on it is that pretty much what you've said, every person can take an action, and together we can solve the problem, right? Collaborative action. And I believe that the experts of the world need to change the way they do their thing in their expertise. So I thought to myself, right, I'm not an expert in the creative arts, or I'm not an expert in media production. I'm not an expert in all these different areas. I can't be an expert in everything. It's impossible for one person. Maybe AI can be an expert in everything, but I'm not AI. I need to stick to what I know. There is a bit of a story missing where when I reconnected with nature on that day, I forced myself to do more and more outdoor activities to get outdoors. I started to build a skill set in outdoor adventures, sports, and things like this.
How? What did you do? What sort of things did you do? Just so people have a sense of some examples, some context.
I had to trick my mind a bit because I realized how society is so trapping. Immediately you get a deadline, and then suddenly you get another deadline and another deadline, and then you're trapping the wheel and you're back indoors and you're looking at screens. I had to break that up. So I created a bit of a strange mindset where I set some audacious tasks outdoors, and I listened to a friend who said the buddy system is really good for keeping you intact for the gym. And I took that one step further, and I started to create audacious tasks outdoors, big like sporting endeavors, and told everyone about it, that I was going to do that.
And what sort of reactions did you get?
You're mad. There's something wrong with you. That's huge. Why would you do that? And I just said, well, I've got nothing to lose. I almost killed myself last year, so I'm sorry, but I've got nothing to lose here. I want to make a difference. So to my own well-being. And I knew that I needed something big that would encourage me to get outdoors. And by telling everybody, it also resulted in that sort of deadline pressure that you also have with your work and your indoor screen time. The boss needs that report, that pressure. I create own pressure.
So you look at that impact on anxiety, for example. If you're susceptible to, you're creating a pressure bubble in some way for yourself. You're creating
for health, though.
It's interesting though how that plays out, isn't it? Because there's clearly accountability within that. There's responsibility that brings a burden. People are now saying, "You said you'd do this.
You gotta do it."
You now have to do that. So, how did that work through for you?
My mindset was that I've said I would do it. I'll give it my best go. If it doesn't go, it doesn't go. I'll try. But the point is, I got myself outdoors, and I was able to repeatedly get better at doing these sports. I focused so much on them as projects, and how I would tackle a project in my university studies, studying something I completely have no idea about, but then starting to learn about it, then write thesis about it, and then suddenly you're not an expert, but you're good at that thing. I applied that same skill set to the outdoors and nature. And I started studying the sport, learning how to do the sport, getting myself to be able to deliver. And I ended up realizing that with these audacious tasks, it encouraged me to get outdoors. I was forcing a life balance. I realized, to be good at this sport, I need to rest. I need to sleep. I can't wake up knackered, or else I'm not going to be able to do that big long run I had planned on Tuesday. So I go to bed early, and so forth. Each aspect of my life started to improve dramatically.
Literally one step at a time.
Oh yeah, like the food. I can't eat that because I've got that sport. I've got to eat healthier. I can't go out drinking or whatever, which I did a bit of drinking at university, more so to take my escapism from the workload, right? This time I was like turning away drink because I was, I've got something to prepare for. And we got to this whole point where I managed to do some big accomplishments like rowing an Atlantic Ocean. That was a big one.
It's quite a big one.
And some really big challenges, which made me feel like, okay, I'm actually leading, I think, in this field now, because started getting some world records and stuff like that. Now I can start turning the tide on change. So I'm going to focus on my area of expertise here, which is the outdoors and nature, and I'm talking outdoor adventures.
Let's go back just a stage, if we may, rowing across the Atlantic. So, we're, again, for the benefit of listeners, we're talking here about taking steps to change your state. I suppose, is that a fair assessment?
Change of state, yeah.
Change of state. So you're using physical exercise and the pursuit of being outdoors, and you're combining all of those things to impact your mental health in a very positive way. For some people, that's a cycle around the park, right?
Yeah.
For some people, that's a walk around the park. For some people, that's half an hour on the treadmill in the gym. 3 weeks ago, they couldn't do 5 minutes, and now they can do half an hour. And so it's all relative. But you're now going to other extremes. You're rowing across the Atlantic.
And finding these challenges. I'm putting them in a diary. Where does the thought come about
for that? How does the mind go from absolute despair to I'm going to row across the Atlantic?
Well, it comes a point where I realize that if I can get myself out of this lowest low of ever, I can do anything.
It becomes almost like a metaphor, if that's all right, for your life. This is how I want to live my life now. It's taking on these really sizable challenges that are really going to stretch me, are really going to test me, but this is how I'm going to grow.
Yeah, there was a bit of this is how I'm going to grow, and there was an experiment going on.
Yeah, interesting.
What's it like to do 40 days in a sport that I have no idea?
Was that natural curiosity that has always been an inherent part of who you are?
I've always been a critical thinker. So at university, I was very critically thinking, it was a skill I was learning really. If I came out of university, I learned one thing, critical thinking.
What were you studying?
I was studying geoscience.
Right.
Bit about the earth, natural resources. There's a bit of philosophy
there.
Yeah, there is a bit there. But critical thinking was what I learned at university. And it's crazy. It's like you could put me in any degree. Yeah, I'll be okay. I might know a bit about maths, or might know a bit about English, or whatever degree. But I think the thing that really was the best thing that came out of uni was critical thinking, and I applied that afterwards.
Had you evidenced any of those kind of extreme? Let's put it in the context that it is extreme sports to row across the Atlantic, complete. Do an Ironman wearing a 15K vest. We'll come on to all of these things. But if I were to, the sort of. It's a little bit American in its reference, but the sort of school yearbook that's most likely to, and then it becomes ... Was Isaac Kenyon at school? Would I have, if I reflected on your school yearbook, would I see a note that's most likely to row across the Atlantic? Was there any sort of evidence at that, early teens, whatever it might be, that this is a guy who's going to take on extreme sporting accomplishment?
I think some of my friends may have said I would go very extreme in whatever I chose.
Right.
So they knew that I'm very focused, and I put 110 into what I do, which I think was my downfall in uni. I put 110 into a screen.
But do you think, though, it strikes me that there is a So you put your mind to something, you're committed. You're kind of all in. You're
Yeah,
all
I'm
in
an
kind
all-in
of. You're
type.
not a little bit in. You're all in. There's
Yeah.
So in the same way, from a studying perspective, you're all in. Your commitment is, I took this on. I will fulfill it. I will max it out. I will realize it's. I realize my full potential through this pursuit.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the academic then becomes the physical, the sporting.
I can't
in much
tell
the
you where it
same
came
way.
from, though. I think it's a genetic thing. I don't know where this all-in mindset came from. Maybe from my dad, watching him work so hard. Perhaps he would work hard. And he said, I love my work.
So you'd see it role modelled from an
he's
early
like,
age.
I love what I do. I love my work. He always would say that. So I think that might have been rubbed off on me in some way, perhaps. Yeah, I just remember him I love fishing.
I'm now intrigued. Of the
and he doing
pursuits,
so much of it.
of the pursuits you've done, which for you stands out as having been the most rewarding? And what might it be, therefore, that would give it that accolade?
This is a really good one. I would say the most rewarding was last year's run through Wales on my own. Because the difference with this one particular adventure, I was alone. All the other things, I worked with people. I worked with teams. I did it collectively. And that particular one adventure, I was on my own. And it was the biggest experiment where I was like really testing the power of nature.
Do you think you're testing the power of your mind with respect? Because how far did you, for context, how far did you run?
I did 220 kilometers in 2 or 3 days. And I went up and down the mountains of Wales from Snowdon to Penafan. It's the first person to do the Welsh Three Peaks Challenge. Maybe some people have heard of it. It's pretty arduous. It's pretty rough going.
I'd say.
It's got some serious off-piste sections. But I chose that challenge for an experiment of going back to that whole, when I did that long walk and had that realization, and I had this aura of nature. Can I use nature and its aura to motivate me?
And could you?
I did. I can conclusively say I did.
Yeah.
I kept going because I was enjoying the immersion. And I could have kept going if the immersion kept going.
How did that play out? How was that manifest for you?
So with endurance, there's fuel, there's a bit of sleep and water. And if you're careful and you can manage your body, you can keep going for a very, very, very long time. I know that from my other journeys, which taught me that, like rowing the ocean and stuff. But when it came to mindset, often working with people, having a chat was very good at picking up yourself. And in business,
you can feed off others, right?
Yes.
When you're in a team environment.
It's incredibly hard. Anyone who tries to do a project on their own by themselves, founders and entrepreneurs often do that, but then eventually get advisors and help, and you're not on your own really. To actually go and try and do something really much like on your own is tough. And I was able to use nature as my companion, and the immersion was the thing that was motivating me, because I'd be in so much pain as anyone would if they're doing endurance running. You would have aches or whatever, and you'd feel hungry or tired. But then there was this insatiable curiosity for what's around the corner in this forest, or what am I going to see next? Because I was just like, wow, every single time I saw these incredible creatures that would cross the path, or some birds that I'd never seen before. The cuckoo, I'd rarely get to hear. I heard it all the time there. Those things were special, and those things were getting me through it. And I enjoyed the run. People were like, 218K, how's that enjoyable? That's not a holiday. It was a holiday, in my opinion.
So I'd imagine that through that, the extreme kind of physical stresses that you're placing upon the body can, as I understand it from talking with people on this podcast like you who've done and succeeded with extreme, can take you to some dark places. If you're not careful, the mind can play tricks on you. It can. Yeah. And having known how that, that mind going into dark places would have felt for you at a very much, an earlier stage in life, and the mental health challenges that presented and difficulties that had given you. Was there ever any sense of, where am I going with this? Where's this taking me? Or was that, how did that play out for you? How did you get through? What was the strength that you were able to
enjoy
muster to enjoy it?
Just the moment, really. I'm so lucky to be here and share this moment with you, nature. Like, that was my mindset. I was like standing here at a lake or running along a lake and just being like, this is my moment and this is you're giving me something here. I'm lucky. And it was just that constant appreciation. It was that's it. So simple.
So what, in your view, what role do you think that, let's call it eco adventures, if we put it into that context, what role can eco adventures and those outdoor experiences to which you refer play in inspiring kind of eco-conscious behavior change, do you think, and fostering a deeper connection to the environment?
I think, yeah, so that bridge, we were talking about how I became an expert. I chose to make my outdoor challenges more environmentally friendly. I felt that it's unfair to do all these incredible journeys or by plane or buy all this expensive kit that's all made from plastic, but again is damaging the environment, and try to change the whole philosophy of an adventure. And I called it eco adventure, where we go and play out in the outdoors, but there's environmental responsibility combined with it. And the experience that I just kind of made my first act of, I guess, sustainability leadership, my first act of properly giving back to nature, was a campaign called Pedal for Parks. And this was the first eco-adventure experience. This was the first one that I created. I brought a team together of like-minded individuals who wanted to protect the planet and loved outdoor activities. So what we decided to do was an A to B journey across the UK, which would combine the immersion of being in nature and cycling through all these lovely national parks, but also talk to and get involved in environmental projects, grassroots projects that are regenerative, that are restoring the planet at the same time. So there is that consciousness of we are collectively enjoying the outdoors, and the outdoors is giving us good physical and mental well-being. But we also are aware that we are taking from nature, and these eco projects are a way of giving back as well. And it's trying to have that mindset of building respect. So that was the first eco adventure, and the whole thing was filmed and it was created in a sustainable way. The whole film production was We Are Albert was our certification, so that we had what we couldn't do sustainably was offsetted, unfortunately. Otherwise, you don't make films. We managed to get the film in COP26 conference, the United Nations conference up in Glasgow, and it got loads of awards and all these things, which was great. But then, that fleeting act of heroism, that one eco adventure, it disappeared quite quickly. And the realization was not much has changed and still things are going as business as usual. And I was like, okay, we need to scale this. I want to use this expertise, but at a higher scale. So I decided to make a community interest company called Climate Explorers CIC, which generates these eco-adventure experiences for businesses, people, organizations, individuals, communities. Come out on these outdoor experiences. We'll take you on a journey. We'll explore eco projects, environmental projects. We'll do some sport. We'll reconnect with nature. We'll do some wellness. And then we'll go back understanding what the hell that sustainability report actually means. It doesn't mean words, sustainability. It means protecting that thing that you had an experience with.
What would you do? The subject of corporate social responsibility is one that has been espoused for many moons.
And ESG and all that,
all of that kind of good stuff. So all well-meaning, but actually in practical terms, what would you see change? What would you do to ensure that its impact is, rather than becoming words in a report, but that actually there is, some organisations, to be fair, do it, but in order that we can ensure a greater meaningful impact, real impact, what would you do?
Well, I would encourage people to first look at their profit margin and loss. If their business is only sustainable because there is no sustainability practices, and you're taking and consuming to be able to do your business, you got to think twice about that.
Yeah,
you really do, because you're contributing to killing the planet, and you're only making money at the expense of nature. And I would say that ESG and CSR is really great if you are able to, give back as much as you can take, and to be able to quantify that. What's your impact on the planet from a collective sense? Are you making impact in your office because you're using renewable electricity or something? Or are you making impact because you've actively reduced your consumption of electricity? And there's so many different ways to think about impact. And I think when we talk about ESG, we're not talking about impact. We're talking about small acts that are like offsetting or something, right? With impact, we're talking a bit more. We're talking about wider implications, behavior change. We're talking about reducing massively or regenerating, contributing to regeneration and stuff like that. It's a bit further than offsetting and things like that. And I think a lot of businesses nowadays are getting to that stage where they realize that we can make money forever until we all die. Or we can make money and not die.
Which would be a better way of...
You choose your card.
It's a win-win, right?
Yeah, you choose your card. There's a decision to be made with every business nowadays. And the biggest decision is, do you want to make loads of money and all die? Or do you want to make a little bit less money and not die? That's, I think, the choice now. And I think people need to start thinking differently around, well, what have the future generations ever done for us? Future generations. Yeah, well, do they deserve to inherit this world that is just completely getting destroyed? Would you like to be them?
Do you get a sense of, this is a topic of conversation that amongst your generation is, and my sense is this, and I take great comfort from it, that there is it's a widely held view, it's a widely held debate, it's widely talked about, and it's increasingly acted upon. Do you get that sense, or is that a naive perspective from an older man? It's just because I have great faith in the human spirit. The human spirit will prevail, and I take great comfort in talking to people like you who want to take action and are taking action. And I look at my own kids, for example, not kids, but I look at how they view the world. That there is that sense of there's like an upswell of change.
Yeah. There's statistics to prove what you're feeling, by the way.
Okay.
Eco-anxiety is like 50 or 60 times higher. Or I think it's 50 to 60% higher in 16 to 24-year-olds than it is for 50-year-olds.
Why do you think that is?
Because they know they're inheriting a world that's getting damaged. There's education and knowledge now that if we continue business as usual, there will be no business to conduct because we're all going to be gone. And they know that they're inheriting a difficult situation where we've got ourselves tied to all of these consumption economies, and we're consuming far more than we're regenerating.
Yeah.
And a regenerative economy or a circular economy, whatever you want to call it, economy like this, it is going to be required. And right now, the people who are making the decisions right now to do that are the 50-year-olds, they're not the 16 to 24-year-olds. Yes, Greta is a big influence, but as you have seen over the years, she's kind of wavered off a bit now. It's now gotten to the stage where it is there are the business leaders who are 50, 60 years old to start thinking about what have future generations ever done for us, or scrap that out the window. Let's give them something that they can look forward to, like you had something you could look forward to, right?
I think that's an interesting perspective. I think that does every generation look upon life slightly through that lens?
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
think, as I say, I'm hugely encouraged, and I think increasingly people of my generation are ever more aware of the need for change, because we hear of it we read of it, we hear of it from our kids, those people that are nearest and our dearest, and we start to think, what does this look like for my kids' generation or my grandkids' generation? You start to look at life through a slightly different lens when you're thinking about, I want to put it in as grandiose a term as legacy, but you're talking about your own legacy from a family perspective. What am I doing to impact this planet positively for my kids or my grandkids or whatever it might be? So I get that sense that there is it may have started as just a ripple, but it is becoming increasingly a wave. And I think that wave is getting bigger. There is still a long way to go, but I do feel like there's a there's a movement of change. Let's go back to mental health briefly, if I may, because you're a trustee for the mental health charity Mind, which is a wonderful institution. How do you think, we've touched on this, but I'm interested just to kind of sum it up. Your work in the environmental and the adventure space, how do you see that? How does that intersect with promoting mental health and well-being? How would you sum that up?
Yeah, so with Mind Charity, they are working on prevention and education around mental health. And I wish when I was 18 at university that these symptoms I could have related to or understood earlier. I could have maybe have taken that walk earlier, or maybe never have needed that walk to make me realize how important getting outdoors and things were. But working with Mind, the relation I have with that is, one, I get to study and learn more about mental health, which is an interesting topic of mine. And I'm very much interested in the connection of mental health with the outdoors and nature and environment and sustainability. I feel there's a thread there. These two things, as we said, are interconnected. So I like having that work with Mind because it allows me to kind of connect the thread ever so strong. And I think if I just did environmental activism on its own, I may lose the intrinsic link of well-being of the planet, well-being of us. And I think that was a penny drop moment for me that saved my life I was at university. That was my moment where I feel everything I do from now is to empower people to, take care of the environment, take care of their mental health and work together. That's what I'm focused on. And that came from that moment, and Mind fits that as like I almost see it as a triangle: outdoor adventures, Mind charity work, environmental sustainability, it's a triangle that all talks to each other. And I like that. I really enjoy kind of hearing new research as well. Being a trustee at Mind Charity, I get to give back and I get to talk about my story with them, but also I get to support charities that are helping others find their way in their mental health journeys like I did. I didn't have any support at that time. Apart from that one friend who intervened, I didn't have any support and I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who I could have spoken to. Life may have panned out differently for me. I might not be so much of an environmental activist if I was given, antidepressant drugs or something. Life may have been very different for me, but I feel like it's come good.
And in terms of then, perhaps, if you look at your work as a motivational resilience speaker, if you like, motivational speaker, in terms of advice or strategies that you'd impart to individuals or teams to maintain resilience, develop maintain well-being, especially in challenging times, what are some of those strategies or advice that you'd impart?
Stay connected with your inner voice.
And how do you do that? What does that mean?
Yeah, so the world right now, as I said, my mental health, I was separated from my inner voice. I was screen blocked, digital technology, information, deadlines, requests, all of these things coming from all angles, blocking me from thinking about the things that I like to think about.
Yeah.
I couldn't think anymore of the day. What did I like today? I didn't even think about those questions, rarely, apart from that little 10-minute walk between the lectures. Well, that inner voice needs to be protected for everyone at all costs. When you lose that inner voice, you lose your meaning, you lose who you are. And that certainly happened to me. And I got it back because nature gave it back. Nature didn't take from me. It didn't block me with loads of stuff. It allowed me to think about who I am, what I want to do, where I need to be. And that inner voice, I think, is something you can work on by separating the blockers. But, if you wake up in the morning and you go to bed at night knowing you've done a load of tasks, but you don't know what for. And many people do that. I think sometimes they're like, where did the day go? Right? Where did the day go? That question is so prevalent. I think everyone says it every now and then. I even say it to this day. I haven't been listening to my inner voice sometimes when that question comes up because I've just been going boom, 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 task. And I think it's important for us to slow down.
And how can people do that? Because I think one of the challenges, and we've alluded to this, is the connectivity of the world in which we find ourselves. And it's almost, to step off that step off the planet, if you like, is for some people an incredibly hard thing to do. That rush of dopamine that comes from, the ping on the device that says, you've got a message or a like or whatever it might be. But it's like we've got these little dopamine devices that we constantly suck on in our pockets that just fuel our days.
Yeah. I like that description.
Yeah, I think that's, and how do you, and for some, and I think particularly, well, actually, it's not a generational thing. It manifests at all stages in life. How do you, what can people do? What techniques can they apply to start to try and step away and reconnect with themselves as well as with nature?
Yeah, I think there's ways to do it. One of the ways that I think has been really important, finding that inner voice, has come from finding flow. So flow is like the optimal state of consciousness, those peak moments of total absorption where time distorts and all aspects of performance go through. Basically, you're enjoying what you're doing and you're loving it. Those moments of flow also allow you to reflect. I always find that because I'm enjoying the moment and things like this, I reflect on that. I'm enjoying that. Okay, my inner voice is telling me you're enjoying that. You're in this moment. You're taking it in. Everything stops. You're there. You're enjoying it. These things are lost often on a daily basis. People all over the world have been researching flow, and people can get it from all sorts of ways, all sorts of activities. And it generally comes from doing something you're really passionate and you really enjoy. And it's not necessarily working through your emails. It's couldn't be more obvious, if that makes sense. It's like, what do you like to do? I say, I like meditation, or I like yoga. You get flow. Or I like drawing. I like arts and crafts. You get flow. I like music. I like singing. You get flow. I like dancing. You get flow. Lots of people have different things, but what happens is those hobbies, those things, they disappear because you start doing other stuff instead. I've got to hit those tasks, hit those deadlines, got to do that. You start putting moments of flow away, those things that you like away. For me, outdoors. I was putting it away. So
you're finding those moments of flow when you're
outdoors,
running Snowdon to Pettifan.
Oh, I'm loving it.
When you're swimming a night as part of the Ironman, that's where you're in that flow state.
That's when I'm in my flow state.
Yeah. I can see just by the look on your face.
Yeah, I love it.
You can feel it now, right? You can put yourself into that. You can experience it.
Yeah, and on a tough day, I might be sitting on a train, and it's a tough day. I can visualize and start feeling good because I'm just visualizing what I like, the flow, and my inner voice is connected. So when I'm in that moment of flow, I'm able to start thinking about strategies, what I want to do with myself, what I want to do with my life, what's not been going so well in life, what's been going, you start self-therapy with yourself. And I think when we're in this day and age where everything is trying to block and take your time, there's no time to reflect, there's no time to find flow, there's no time to do things you like, because there's just things taking your time up. And that, I think, is scary, and the world will improve dramatically if everyone found flow.
So it's fair to say, master of understatement that I might be, you've undertaken some remarkable feats. Swimming seas, cycling across countries, I mean, you name it, remarkable. What drives you to take on those challenges? I understand the dynamic. Originally, I understand what set you off on that path, but what drives you to keep going?
Yeah, connecting with the outdoors requires me to... This is the mechanism that's worked for me, and I've kept it. I've maintained it because it seems to be what works for me. Big audacious challenge that's quite immersive in the outdoors, related to sport, allows me to constantly change my lifestyle so that I can be focused on sport. Because there was a moment where I rode across the Atlantic Ocean and I spent a couple months not doing anything. No sports, there was no challenges on the horizon.
Part of which would have been recovery, though, right?
Recovery people would say that. But I started going into the same cycle as I was doing at academia. Yeah, I started filling the time up. Well, there's all these things that are trying to fill your time up. And I just started filling the time up with loads of other things.
And that monkey mind's telling you need to be busy, right?
Yeah.
You need to be busy.
The
you need to be
paradox.
busy. Yeah, it's there going, be busy because you're busy, you're important, right? It makes you feel you're valued. I've got purpose because I'm busy.
And I realized that coming in, and I say, no, we're not doing this again. This is not happening again. Come on, Isaac, let's go for a walk. Same again. Went for a walk, and that was where I started getting creative, and I started to create a lot more ideas and thoughts about what I wanted to do in terms of outdoor adventures, and then creativity. I created an outdoor event, and then I started going back into that lifestyle that I was enjoying before the Atlantic Road. That straight afterwards it disappeared, but then I brought it back. And ever since, I always do that. And then people always say to me, okay, what happens if you're getting disabled, or you can't do this anymore? Like your legs go. What happens if you can't do outdoor adventures? I said, I'll find a way to get outdoors. It might not be, running anymore if my legs are gone, but I'll get outdoors because I know I need it, and I'll make challenges or things for me to be out there. And I know this is how I live, and this is how I want to live.
So how do these adventures for you contribute to your, what I would describe as a broader mission to inspire positive change?
I think it is quite inspiring for protecting the planet. So the adventures in the past were very much about finding myself, keeping myself fit and healthy, mental health focus. But only recently, after the last 3 or 4 years, that I've started to really drive home that environmental message, because over the journey, I've realized that environmental message is the reason I'm doing it, but I'm not translating that in the way I communicate with anyone. People think I'm doing it because of mental health. I'm not doing mental health as well. I want to do it because I want to drive sort of a respect with nature within myself. I get outdoors.
Do you think that's how the purpose has changed?
Yeah.
There's been that evolution that first and foremost for rightly a very good place of wanting to put yourself on the right path in terms of the strength of your mental health and your well-being. But it's become, strikes me as it's become part of a bigger purpose now.
Yeah, like that, I think, mental health thing where you can't help anyone if you can't help yourself. If you're a wreck, you can't help anyone.
You've got to love yourself first, right?
Yeah, I think so. Love yourself and also be one with yourself, sort of thing, like healthy.
I think that I should qualify that phrase, I apologise, because I think there's a risk that sense of loving yourself can be misinterpreted as, not by you, but by people, could be misinterpreted as conceit or arrogance or, put it this way, not a particularly positive trait. I would argue quite the reverse. How that manifests externally, yes, of course, but internally, if you can't, you learn to love yourself first.
Yeah.
You could then learn to love others. You can learn to love
other things,
the world, the world in which you find yourself. You can then start to, corny phrase, but then you can start to spread the love. But it's got to start from within, right?
That's what happened with me. I think 18, 19, 20 university, I fell out of love with myself.
Yeah.
I was wrecked. Mental health was poor. Recovery over a few years, doing all these adventures helped with the recovery process. Suddenly there was a turning point. I can give back a bit more. I can give a bit more. Let's not be, I guess, oblivious to the fact that the first few adventures up into the Atlantic Road, I was still taken from nature. I was going outdoors, getting my fix of health. It was giving me health.
But arguably, is that not what nature was intended for? That actually, what you're taking from nature is you're not taking in the sense of, you're not taking and not putting back.
Yeah, it's not like I'm cutting a tree and then...
No, you're taking nourishment, if you like. It's like you're taking your food, right? You're getting your vitamins and your supplements and your antioxidants, all that. But you're taking it that way. So all the things you need to do to survive, to improve your mental well-being. So you're taking from nature in the positive sense of the phrase, I would argue, not in the negative sense of the phrase.
But I do see in national parks, those trails, they're starting to destroy the environment a bit. Too many people going on the trails. There is an act of outdoor adventure issues.
Do you think? That's interesting.
The Everest thing.
Yeah, okay.
The plastic on, they find microplastics at the...
Okay, that's a good point.
So there is that. So I do need to give back, and protect as well.
How do you affect that positively, given that, playing devil's advocate, right? So absolutely, you make a really good point. Everest Base Camp is it's almost becoming Everest dumping ground, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there is an element of people who might argue, well, yeah, but for argument's sake, you've done it, why shouldn't I?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Why should we close that down and prevent me from achieving what I might want to? Okay,
That's where the eco adventures come in.
Very selfish perspective, but particularly that I want to contribute to the planet. I want to give back. Sustainability is an important issue for me. Regeneration is a really important issue for me. But hey, I also want to climb Everest.
Well, this is it. It's like nowadays, upon reflection, buying up my heart on my sleeve here, I've damaged that environment by doing that, by going there. If I went to Everest and I enjoyed it, I flew out there, I left my kit there, I damaged the environment. I didn't feel good about it. So now what I do is I do eco adventures.
Right.
I try to give back positively during the adventure. So if I'm there, I'm contributing to regeneration as well. I'm getting hands-on with some environmental projects. I'm getting involved. I think if we can consciously all do that, then we can all enjoy going to Everest and whatever, or going to these places if we know how to give back as well. And I made a mistake in the first early days of my adventuring, but I wasn't doing that. I'm getting my fix. I need my mental health fix. I need to get outdoors.
Again, though, there is in and of itself, it's not entirely, I would argue, not an entirely selfish pursuit. You know, if you look at fixing yourself, if you like, how that has now manifest in terms of your ambition to fix the planet, that's not, the journey is not a bad journey.
Yeah, I feel like it's a good journey now, but I'm quite hard on myself, you see. And that's where I guess a lot of the mental health and the perfectionism, 100% going all in. I've got very big standards of myself and what I do, right?
You make me think as to a conversation I had many years ago with someone for whom I have a huge amount of respect around the issue of mental health and depression. And I remember him saying to me that there has been a perception historically, perhaps, that poor mental health was an affliction of the weak. So it was a weakness, right? So you were weak if you were mentally unwell, unhealthy, depressed, whatever it might, anxious, however it might want to manifest. That's weak people that do that. And actually this guy had totally, and that was always my worry around how it might be perceived wherever to you to admit. I say that as a 51-year-old man growing up in the 80s and 90s. Nobody talked about mental health.
The boss might fire you.
Yeah, absolutely. You get fired for it. And this guy, I remember him saying to me, mental health is not an affliction of the weak, it's an affliction of the strong.
Yeah.
And actually what he meant by that is that people who are incredibly hard on themselves, who have really exacting and very high expectations of what they can achieve, also perhaps might be wired to beat themselves up when they don't achieve it.
Yeah, exactly.
So their own worst self-critic. So it's like you become a self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't quite get to where you want to go. It's a very different, but it changed my thinking in terms of how I might have perceived mental well-being.
That, I believe, is really true to my life, and it fits exactly sort of the view set of when I was younger. I was very much of, I felt awful, but I was not telling anyone because I was like, don't show weakness.
Which in and of itself is not unusual, is it? I mean, I think it's wonderful
men,
now.
Yeah. Most men still to this day, yeah.
But the fact that here we are, that you and I can sit in a room and discuss it, that arguably and discuss it openly in an open forum, arguably 10 years ago.
You wouldn't be doing that, no.
We wouldn't be doing this.
I don't even know what mental health was 10 years ago.
I would say it was just from a corporate perspective, job-wise, it was just starting to appear on my radar. It's just starting to, maybe 15, it was just starting to be talked about. Yeah. But there was still a stigma.
Yeah, massively. And that was 10 years ago, was exactly when it was all going wrong for me.
Well, I think part of the challenge is, if you break your leg, you have a plaster and people could see it. So they could say, poor you.
If you break your brain,
if you break your brain,
there is no plaster, but it might manifest in other ways.
And also, people can't necessarily, if they've never suffered from it, it's something that's very hard to relate to if you've never experienced it, or somebody very near and dear to you has never experienced it. If you've never actually seen it at play, you have a perception of what it might be, but everybody understands what a broken leg looks like. Yeah, it hurts, right? Ow, poor you. Hope you get better soon. So it's there are the stigma around it. I think the fact that these conversations can take place, the fact that we can now start to have very candid discussions about the impact of mental well-being, contributing positively to mental health, and then we then start to wrap that into the planet, climate agenda, sustainability, that we can talk about these things. It's the beauty of the podcast forum.
Yeah.
It's just shift the paradigm.
And then I always would love to talk about it, but I also like to do the actions.
Yes.
And that is really key. And that's what the eco-adventure thing is. It's an action. So it's enabling action. That's why we started this company. That's why I am so passionate about the eco-adventure term, because it's not policy. We're not writing this down. We're not talking about it. We're actually just doing it. It's an activity. It's an experience. We're doing it. And I felt that was so important for me getting out of eco-anxiety. That action of that walk was so important for me to get out of my mental health situation. And also, action is the only way we're going to be able to regenerate what we've already taken, because we've done a lot of other actions. Maybe we do different actions now.
Well, on that point of taking action, for listeners who perhaps are interested in becoming more involved in environmental activism or promoting mental health, what practical steps or initiatives could they take in their own daily lives, perhaps, that you would advise?
Yeah. Well, see yourself at what you're good at, and see if you can do what you're good at in a way that is maybe more environmentally friendly, or good for the planet, because that's how I started with it. So I reflected on all the things that I do on a day-to-day basis, and then I also reflected on my major activities, the things that I'm skilled at. And I looked at those things and I just thought, okay, how can I do these things in a better way for the environment? This is one of the things that I talk about. If you have to buy a watch, see if you can get a recycled one. Like, this is Tria, one of my brands that I work with closely. And whenever I think of, I need to get something, can I get it secondhand? Can I get it from a way of that doesn't damage the planet? So consumption from its core comes almost from our lifestyles, what we eat, what we drink, what we wear. So can we replace some of those things? That's okay for some people who are slightly wealthier at the moment, because it is expensive, and I appreciate that. But there is a lot of secondhand out there that is cheaper, and there's more clothes and more things than there is that you could possibly imagine in shops. There's more surplus than what's in shops right now.
Yeah.
So why are we buying? We don't need to buy anymore. There's no more to buy. Well, that's one thing anyway. Think about your consumption things that you do in your lifestyle. Then think about where your area of expertise is. Say you're an accountant. Okay, how, as an accountant, can I help the environment? Have a think. There are ways. There's loads of ways. And if you can't think about a way, you've probably heard of ChatGPT. Throw it in there. I'm sure they will find a way for you. But you know what I mean? There's ways. There's a lot of ways we can change our behaviors. And you might say, well, I love eating beef and I don't want to change my diet. And I've heard that beef has incredible damage to the environment from emissions and the amount of water consumption and things like that. And I think we can reduce, and that's a good impact. If we all reduced our meat intake, maybe, collectively, we might be able to keep cows on the planet and eat beef if we all reduce massively. There's so many different aspects of our lives that we can touch upon. But it starts with the mindset, the critical thinking. Take that critical thought. What do I do, and how could I make it more environmentally friendly? And I'm sure everyone will find something. Somewhere you'll find something that you could change.
So let's look on your own activism or active pursuits in particular. So the last of which, am I right in saying, was the Ironman? Is that right? So
yeah.
Ironman. Wearing a 15K vest. So you made the very conscious decision to add an extra 15K of unnecessary weight just to make it that little bit harder for you, just to kind of, so.
This was a dedicated campaign to men's mental health.
Yep. And how did that play out for you?
So the weight was a great challenge.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Because I've done swimming, I've swam seas, I swam the English Channel, I've done cycling, I've cycled countries. I've also run on basically the length of a country as well, Wales. So I've done all these pursuits at length, separately. I never put them together really in a triathlon. I have done triathlons, but not like an Ironman, which is an all-day affair. And the weighted vest, I thought it would be really challenging to see how would the weighted vest impact the body in all of these different sports. So I had to think differently to a triathlon or an Ironman training session plan.
And just for context for listeners, so the Ironman, so that's a 2.5 miles swim?
Yeah. It's a 2.5 mile, 3.8K.
3.8K swim. How far on the bike?
It's 112 miles on the bike. I think it's 180 kilometers.
And then a marathon, so 26.2 miles.
Yeah, marathon run. Yeah, 42.2.
One after the other, non-stop.
One after the other, non-stop.
Which in and of itself is brutal.
I think a lot of people know of the Ironman as brutal. Yeah, it's got that marketing thing, isn't it? I think that even the events sometimes are called "Do the Brutal." It's definitely the one.
Yeah.
And there are things like double Ironmans, triple Ironmans that make it harder. But I wanted to do something that also visualized mental health. Yes, I could have worn a brain costume. I've done that before. I've worn a brain costume to visualize it. But I actually wanted to represent the weight because
okay, interesting.
I think, we can wear a brain, but it's a brain. I mean, it's not actually signifying that mental burden that we carry with mental health. So the weight itself is the mental burden. What I was carrying was the mental burden. And what was great about this experiment was, as with mental health, if you do not deal with your mental health, the weight gets bigger. It gets heavier. Well, I can tell you, as I got more tired during that Ironman, that weight got heavier. I got slower and slower. It got harder and harder as the day went on. And it was perfect reflection. I was like, looking back from a physical sense, I was like, I've literally gone through the journey of poor mental health. And then right at the end, there's a film on this. And if anyone's interested, they can watch the film. But right at the end, I lift the weight off because the cameraman says, "Can you tell me how you're feeling?" I said, "I'm feeling weighed down." And I eventually open up, right? That my mental health is done. I've got really bad mental health. I've opened up and I lift the weight off and I'm like, oh, that feels good.
Fantastic. Great achievement.
Yeah.
So it inevitably begs the question. It's a lazy question, but I want to ask it anyway. What next? What have you got lined up? Where do you go from here? Yeah,
so I think what next for me is I'm doing lots of mini eco adventures around the country because I'm creating little itineraries for our service, the Eco Adventure service, to take corporates, companies, communities, individuals, marginalized groups, take them out and get them immersed. So I'm basically spending this next year doing lots of micro adventures, testing them out, immersing myself in them. How would that play out? And then obviously taking a few people I know on them as well to see how it go. And then we'll test them out with actual clients and supporters of this movement. So yeah, that's what's going on next. After that, I've got some big audacious stuff as well in the background.
Fantastic. I thought you might have.
Yeah, I've got. So this is a great thing about the outdoors is creative mindset.
Yeah.
So if anyone,
where do you get your inspiration from out of interest?
Just thoughts of myself. So when you just walk sometimes, and you just feel like, oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
I write it down. So I even have creative sessions where, very much like how in business you'll get in a room and you have a brainstorm, I go outdoors with a notepad and I have a brainstorm with nature. Nature gives me that brainstorming session. But also when I'm doing activities, I will write the ideas straight in my phone, voice note the ideas, listen to them back afterwards. Because ideas come from, I believe, movement or like doing.
I don't get ideas other way. I rarely will I sit there and think, right, it's time to think. How can I be creative? But I'll get countless ideas. Taking my dog for a walk.
Yes, I don't actually. To be honest, I feel really bad on the podcast. I should have a stat for this or something, but I don't actually have the scientific evidence to prove that. I'd love to, but I think there is science out there, and I think after this conversation sparked that idea for me to go do some research on it. But I generally feel like the movement gives me ideas, and getting outdoors allows me to think about them in clarity. Because when I'm indoors, I feel attached to the deadlines or the work and all the things like that. But when I'm outdoors, I feel separate. So I have a far more clear mind to take it all in and then write it down. That's always key. If I don't write it down, it gets lost a bit.
So where should we be pointing listeners? Where should listeners go to find out more? You have a TED Talk?
I mean, if we can
online, where let's give some information to listeners to help them understand more about you and where they should go.
If you want to hear, I've got loads of other stories and other conversations, things like this, and services that I offer, and also adventures and things that you can get inspiration from on my website, isaackenyon.com.
isaackenyon.com.
Yeah, so it's easy.
ISAAC Kenyon.com.
Yes. You could just Google and you'll find stuff. And I'm sure people may have some questions. I'm very open to accept conversations. I'm often open to any conversation as long as it's not like a swearing at me or something. But yeah, I'm happy to chat about these. I love these conversations that I've just had with you today. It's just, this is what I live for, these conversations.
Well, I was very fortunate to have had a guest on a previous episode who made the point, everything stems from great conversation.
I think so. Yeah, even if it's with yourself.
Absolutely. But he was talking about it in the context, we were talking about it in the context of business and sales and marketing, but he was making the point that, that he made the point, great quote, I'll never forget it, but whales don't swim through funnels. He was talking about marketing funnels. Yeah. But he was talking about landing that big client comes from great conversation, listening and engaging. I think you're right. But I think clearly we're talking about a really important topic here today, mental health. I take my hat off for you for the great strides, the great work that you've put into, first and foremost, turned yourself around, because that won't have been easy, but and I think that's one thing I've learned, is that is a constant journey. There is no end game with that. It's a constant evolution. But also then taking that very positively to the impact that you're making very powerfully on sustainability and taking action to impact the planet in a very positive way and people in very positive ways. It's a really great message, Isaac. So I really appreciate you coming on today and talking about it. It's been great. Yeah,
I've really enjoyed it. And to be honest, I'm going to keep doing it forever. It's the thing that keeps me alive.
Fantastic.
It really is.
Well, I really appreciate your time. Yeah. Great to have you on Extrology. And I wish you well. Look forward to hearing about more adventures in the future, maybe talking about them on future podcasts. But I wish you well. It's a great example. You're a great inspiration. It's great that there are people out there doing what you're doing. I really appreciate you sharing it with us.
Thanks.
Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for listening to today's Extrology podcast. I really appreciate your audience and ears. If you've enjoyed it, then why not hop onto iTunes and give us a review? I'd really appreciate anything that you might have to say. Any feedback always gratefully received, and look forward to hosting you next time. See you soon. Just a reminder, today's podcast is brought to you by Progresso Talent Partners. Visit www.progressotalent.com today for more information.